In today's video, there's several things to talk about, including Rashee Rice's upcoming suspension possibly being for longer than initially expected, the Broncos continuing to Bronco as they trade for a new quarterback, Tyreek Hill still whining about the Chiefs, Justin Jefferson somehow being a potential landing spot for KC, and more. So let's talk about it. But first, how about those? First up, the Broncos unveiled new uniforms today that put about 6,900 triangles on the helmet in honor of the Illuminati and a Chargers logo on the sleeve to honor an enemy within the division. Well, they say it represents the rugged terrain of the area, but there's nothing rugged about this poverty franchise. Not buying it, just like fans aren't buying tickets to watch this team lose over half their games this season. But wait, maybe they won't this year because they just traded for a new quarterback today, a real game changer in Zach Wilson, formerly of the Jets. That's right, their new uniform budget was very high, but since they're paying a ton of money for Russell Wilson to be on the Steelers, they settled for the Diet Wilson instead. The former number 2 overall pick was traded from New York to the Broncos today, with both teams splitting his $5.5 million salary for this year. The Broncos then had to give up a 6th. Meanwhile, the Jets sent over Wilson along with a 7th. And according to Diana Rossini of The Athletic, there's belief in the Denver building Zach Wilson still has a ton of talent and potential. Well, okay if you say so. And with Aaron Rodgers set to try again this year as the starter in New York, the Jets now have Tyrod Taylor as their QB2. Meanwhile, the Broncos now have Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, and Ben DiNucci? I don't know how to say his name, but between this and the Raiders signing Gardner Minshew and still having Aiden O'Connell on the roster, I'm not sure which QB room makes my eyebrows raise more than the other due to the sheer amount of randomness this has all added up to be. But hey, if it results in the Chiefs sweeping both teams again this year, I know they didn't last year, but if they do it again this year, fine by me. Something else that's fine by me would be the HBTC blend of Benchwarmer Brew, my own coffee. Thankfully, Brandon Perna let a Chiefs fan on his blend because he knows what real winners are, and that's anybody that represents the Kansas City Chiefs. So a way to kind of rub salt in the wound of Brandon Perna and support the channel would be to go to coffee.hbtchiefs.com and get yourself a bag today. Next up, I saw an article that made me look twice, maybe 3 times at it, making sure I myself was sober, and this article was by Anthony Palacios of Last Word on Sports. He dropped an article today listing 3 potential landing spots for Vikings receiver Justin Jefferson. I'm not even going to get into the other 2 teams because I don't really care. I just happened to see that the first team he mentioned was the Kansas City Chiefs. That's right. He says the team could be ready to go all in on a receiver since the team hasn't had any luck finding a wideout this offseason. I mean, I guess Hollywood Brown literally doesn't exist to him. And yeah, sure, the wide receiver class may be loaded in this year's draft, but the Chiefs may not be intrigued, says the author, and Rice could end up never returning after his investigation ends. More on the Rice suspension talk later in this video, but I highly doubt the suspension is going to be full/all season long. Anyway, this author then said another reason why the Chiefs could get Jefferson is because they haven't been able to find their star wideout since trading away Tyreek Hill, but the Chiefs have won back-to-back Super Bowls after trading away Tyreek Hill, doing so with a very mediocre receiver room last year. I'm not saying to keep the wide receiver room as it is. They obviously aim to make upgrades. They got Hollywood Brown. They're going to get at least 1 guy in the draft. And then you have Rashee Rice, who is supposed to take a step up this year, depending on how long he is suspended. Editor Cole here. To clarify, when I say Rice was supposed to take a step up this year, it's not because he had a bad rookie season. We all know it was incredible, but he was supposed to expand his role next year per the team this offseason. So my question about this article, Justin Jefferson being a potential trade candidate to the Chiefs, is why would the Chiefs need to trade 3 to 4 draft picks and pay Justin Jefferson $33+ million a year when they could simply draft a nice wide receiver this year, even trading up in round 1 due to it being the best wide receiver draft class possibly ever. And then you have a cost control guy on a rookie deal for 5 years and a lot of your draft picks intact. That's going to be the key for the Chiefs for a few years here, is staying young and cheap, hitting as well as they possibly can in the draft. I mean, Chris Jones's contract is going to skyrocket. Mahomes' contract isn't going to be any cheaper. And you have Joe Thuney, among others, still taking up quite a bit of money on the team's roster. I mean, I get the intrigue for Justin Jefferson. He is an elite wideout, possibly wide receiver 1 in the entire league, but it just wouldn't make a ton of sense from an investment standpoint. And Kansas City, though, I am happy to be wrong. If Brett Veach and company find a way to make this happen and give Patrick Mahomes his weapon of the future with Travis Kelce, on his way out in the next couple of years, just mainly due to age and him being able to kill it with his podcast and who he happens to be dating, there's endless possibilities for Kelce. So, hey, if the Chiefs want to go get their wideout of the future, okay then, fine by me. And hey, since we mentioned Tyreek and the trade and the Chiefs winning 2 Super Bowls since he's been gone, Tyreek himself recently appeared on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, and he had a couple of pretty funny moments in there about the Chiefs. The first one was when his coach, Mike McDaniel, completely clowned on him after Snead shoved his face into the dirt on a play in the wild card game between the two teams.
The play against Snead, the Chiefs, everybody see this play against the Chiefs when one him into the floor, he called me out. He like, Reek, bro, you supposed to be the best player in the league, and you got this guy putting hands all over you like that. Man, we pay you all this money for what?
We pay you all this money for what? McDaniel is a savage. And this reminds me of the time Tyreek was on the Pivot podcast, I think early March, so 6 weeks or so ago, and he told them about the time that Patrick Mahomes completely roasted him in a meeting behind the scenes. It wasn't only Tyreek, it was kind of everybody around there, but this was during a losing stretch in a season a couple years ago.
This dude called the whole offense up. He called the whole offense up. He cussed all of us the out. Individually pointed us out, looked us in the eyes, and said, bro, Reed, you think you so fast, but you can't catch the ball. You want to be the best receiver in the game. He was letting me have it.
Oh, how I wish I could have been a fly on the wall during some of these conversations, because I would have loved to freaking see it. Anyway, the last thing to touch on here in this most recent interview that Tyreek gave was when Tyreek said he felt disrespected that the Chiefs gave running back Isaiah Pacheco number 10 shortly after he was traded to Miami.
But you can hear and see every step he take. That be so hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I did feel disrespected when they gave him 10, though. I ain't like that.
You ain't like
it's
that?
It's only 110 now.
There's only 110.
It should be only 110 in your heart, man.
Well, I'm not really sure what he was expecting the Chiefs to do here. Retire the number? Not happening. Therefore, just like Reek opted to move on, take the payday, he likes it over there, happy for him, great. But the Chiefs also opted to do the same and give another player number 10. End of story. But a story that just keeps on going is one about wide receiver Rashee Rice, who has been in the news plenty this offseason since crashing the Lamborghini he was renting, and one of his friends crashed his Corvette while they were both speeding down a Texas freeway the day before Easter. And fast forward to now, Rice is facing a $1 million plus lawsuit for injuring some victims in the 6-car pileup. And then they also fled the scene, which is not good. So there's legal repercussions on the way for that, the lawsuit, and possible discipline from the NFL, which I'll get to in a second. So while he's facing like 8 felony charges, many think those are going to get pled down to maybe a couple misdemeanors, and he'll be able to avoid jail time and probably end up on diversion while needing to pay fines out the freaking wazoo. The next question from here is this incoming discipline from the NFL. How great of a discipline are we really talking about here? Well, Adam Schefter shared in an article today that the Chiefs are expected to keep close eyes on a wide receiver in the draft, and that's no surprise considering they need help there at the position. Think about it. Kadarius Toney, the last year of his deal. Sky's in year 3, but we don't really know how he's going to pan out. Hollywood Brown signed a 1-year deal. Justin Watson on the last year of his deal. So yeah, you need some help. Anyway, Schefter goes on to say in this article that, quote, Rice is expected to be disciplined by the NFL, resulting in at least a multi-game suspension. And if you need to know how vague that is, the definition of multi-game suspension pertains to more than 1 game. So, okay, guys, Rice will now be suspended for at least 2 games per breaking news extraordinaire Adam Schefter. I mean, we all know a suspension is incoming, and we already knew it was going to be for more than 1 game. The question really is, how many multi-games are we talking about here? 2 to 4, 4 to 6, or 6 plus? I'm in the 2 to 4 games camp, though obviously won't be surprised if it's more. I feel like the consistency around the league for suspension times are about as reliable as Joe Burrow in the 4th quarter during the playoffs. Not very great. So a suspension's coming. We just honestly have no idea how long it's going to be. Well, somebody that has a lot more knowledge about situations like this would be the lawyer, Seth Kaiser himself, and he thinks that the league could do something along the lines of a 6 to 8 game suspension for Rice, so that's a little bit more than I was thinking, and would love for Seth to be wrong, though he's obviously way smarter than me. And with the draft coming up in a few days here, will the Chiefs opt to focus a bit more heavily on wide receiver early on in this draft than they would have had Rice not been in any legal trouble at all? Well, Chiefs GM Brett Veach was asked about this last week, and he made it seem like this wouldn't change much, noting that this is a deep receiver class, and he feels good about the guys in the top 50, but also a pocket of guys outside of the top 50. So they know they need a receiver, but he's not sure that the incoming suspension, whatever that's going to be for Rashee Rice, is going to change the emphasis or the priority on when they end up getting a receiver. But this is smoke screen season, and therefore the Chiefs could trade up in round 1 for somebody like Brian Thomas Jr. around pick 20. I've been saying that. Or stay put and get somebody like Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, or Ricky Pearsall at pick 32, or maybe even for another position group there, round 1, maybe tackle. Left tackle is a huge need, and opt for someone instead like Malachi Corley, Troy Franklin, Xavier Legette, or Malik Washington at pick 64. There's also the possibility that the Chiefs trade up into round 2 to get a guy they like, but don't think will still be there at pick 64. For example, they traded up for Rice last year in round 2, and he balled out his rookie year. So maybe they think they have another guy in round 2 or round 3 for this upcoming draft, considering how deep the wide receiver class is. And with all that being said, let me know in the comments down below if the Chiefs picked a receiver in round 2, opting for another position entirely in round 1. Who would you like them to get? Who do you think they potentially trade up to get in round 2? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?